One of my interests in the world is America and the 1960s and President Kennedy and Jacqueline Onassis. I think that the 60s was an important period for America because it did a lot of change in America. We had the 40s and the 50s, but the 60s were kind of a very upbeat, prosperous time for America, full of hope and prosperity. And I think the President Kennedy was important in that, and in particular Jacqueline Onassis as well. I think she was the first lady of President Kennedy, and I think she was very influential for the 60s in kind of the role she played with his assassination and death. I think she kind of was very closely involved in the assassination of President Kennedy, and she crawled out of the car when President Kennedy was assassinated. I think it's very unusual for to be a presence of a first lady of the president when he was assassinated. If you look at how President Kennedy was assassinated, he kind of slumped with a brain injury, and I think Jacqueline Onassis, rather than comforting the murder of President Kennedy and his assassination, she kind of scrambled out of the car, and I think that's what's very significant with Jacqueline Onassis, in that she's kind of some kind of testimony with President Kennedy and his assassination. I think she's some kind of a victory ornamentation in President Kennedy's assassination, because it's very unusual to witness some kind of scrambling out of a car, like she scrambled out of a car. I think when President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, I think it was very unusual because he kind of just dropped his head and died. And I think the unusual situation is in how Jacqueline Onassis dealt with that vision of assassination slump. It was some kind of assassination slump, and I think that when a president is murdered like that, in some kind of a slump of a murder, for a president's wife to scramble out of the car is some kind of a vision that perhaps America is scrambling away from Russia, who could be responsible for that assassination. So I think that's a very important vision in a president's assassination. Nobody has a vision of how an American president has been assassinated, but we do have a vision of how President Kennedy has been assassinated, and he's been assassinated like that slump, a murder slump like that. His head just dropped, his head was blown apart like that, a bit of his head was blown apart, and then he just slumped like that, and he was dead. And then she just scrambled out of the car, Jacqueline Onassis. She didn't hold her head to his shoulder or to his chest. She didn't put her arm around his shoulders or anything. She didn't comfort him. She just scrambled out of the car, and that's how the vision of Kennedy's assassination looks, that's the end of the 60s. That's the end of Russia in America. And that's just America alone with America. That's my view of that.